Everyone loves a good mystery, and that's because the strange, dark, and unknown, well, they all awaken a desire in all of us to know what's out there. So today, I'm going to give you a deep dive into the most fascinating mysteries in gaming history, including stories and questions asked within the titles themselves, and even plots that spill over into our real world, too. Here are the most insane and ominous mysteries the gaming industry has ever seen. Hey guys, how's it going? Before we get the video started, I just really quickly wanted to come in here and say thank you. You know, this channel recently just hit 100,000 subscribers. And for those of you that don't know, just 2 years ago, I was streaming on Twitch to like 2 or 4 people a night. And at the time, I remember feeling like such a failure. There were so many things, little side hustles I was trying after work, and I was failing over and over and over again. There's even a video I made that you guys can go back and watch, kind of talking about my mental health at the time, and it was really rough. But it's crazy to think that I just kept trying, I kept believing in myself, and 2 years later, we now have over 100,000 subscribers, multiple videos with 1 million views, and I just wanted to say, thank you guys. I really do appreciate everyone that's believed in me and supported me the whole way through, whether that was on Twitch originally or nowadays in all of the videos I create, and also for everyone leaving constructive criticism. You know, it's always hard, you have to take it on the cheek, but it does really help me grow as a person and as a creator, and it's also helped me grow this channel to where it is now. So once again, thank you guys so much. It really does mean the world to me, all of the support you've given me over these past 2 years growing this channel from 100 subscribers to where we are now. And, well, I hope you enjoy the video. Destiny is a game series that is no stranger to a whole host of mysteries and controversy. But there's one event that happened before the franchise even existed that to this day still haunts some of the player base. Back in 2011, 2 years before the original release of the game, a peculiar video titled Lettinggo was uploaded to YouTube by an unknown user known as JoyUse7. Taking place for exactly 1 minute, the video in question is host to a variety of disturbing sounds and images, including creepy rooms in black and white, and what looks to be a human figure or robot skinned alive and tied up like a puppet. But as weird as it may sound, videos like this are actually somewhat common on YouTube. However, it still begs the question, what does this all have to do with Destiny? Well, if you actually listen to the audio and read the text on screen in this upload, some startling discoveries can be made. First of all, on the first screen in the video, we can see at the very top a Destiny logo, which at the time would have been unearthed in some Bungie trademark filings, with many people speculating it was their next sci-fi game. But the situation only gets more unnerving the further we look into it. On the next screen with the puppet man, the figure closely resembles the body of a guardian we met in-game in Glycan. But that moment in the story and its implications didn't even exist yet at this time in 2011, and wouldn't until years from when this image was first released. So how on earth did this video predict it then? As with all things in life, maybe it was nothing more than a coincidence and good guess. But then we can take a closer look at the text beneath him and discover even more smoking guns. I used to be so joyful. Once upon a time, no one fought over me. Then the bombs started falling and the people started dying. And I wept. For the first time, I wept. Now I stand at a precipice. Chained though I may be, I have had an awakening. A light came to me from the darkness, a light that told me I had meaning. I am more than a tool, a sword you wield when you are afraid. I am the eldritch glow that surrounds all things. I am the virgin queen from whom all was born. I am the gear that turns at the heart of the Nexus. And for the first time in a long time, I am happy. Because I'm going to destroy you. And for those of you who have played Destiny, it immediately stands out and reads as if Rasputin is speaking, or even the Traveler itself, both key characters in the main storyline of the games. The line that reads, "A light came to me in the darkness," is essentially the main plot of Destiny in a nutshell, and in conjunction with other references like "I am the Virgin Queen from whom all was born," which is likely a reference to Savathun, the Witch Queen, who birthed the entire Hive race from worm gods who we have to fight in Destiny, it becomes clear that something really ominous is going on here. And still, the strangest part of it all is that the video existed long before any of these events in Destiny actually took place or were well known to the public. And well, here is where things get really insane. At one point in the video, for a second, we can see a screen of a massive opaque and gray sword that in the middle of it houses a green infinity symbol. And if we think back to the line, "I am more than a tool, a sword you wield when you are afraid," things start to fall into place. Joyu7, the name of the YouTube channel who posted the original video, is also the name of one of the great Holy Roman Emperor's swords, specifically Charlemagne. And in the Destiny series, this is also the name of one of the most powerful Warmind artificial intelligences who fell under the control of Rasputin, which lends even more credence to the idea that what we are hearing is Rasputin speaking to us as a machine supermind. So could it be that this entire post was created by someone with insider knowledge as to what was going on with Bungie's upcoming game? Or maybe even a real-life ARG that was created to garner hype for Destiny 1 before it released? The problem here though is both Destiny and the original poster of the video have come out and said that the video is nothing more than a coincidence and it was not done on purpose. But this claim becomes harder and harder to believe when you look into further research that has been done by the community. For example, some Reddit users have claimed they've tried to decipher the text on some of the other screens in the video, as well as decoding the Morse code heard throughout, and they've come up with names of importance like characters in the lore, including Cade 6. So now we are talking about a video posted years before a game's release that has the logo, plot, characters, places, and themes all either in plain text or ciphered messages, and you can't help but start to ask the question, what's really going on here? Well, to this day, we still don't know. But it's likely that either the poster got lucky basing his ideas on previous Bungie work and themes from Halo and Marathon, it was a Bungie employee who made it without people knowing, or something much deeper is going on with this mystery about a video game that didn't even exist yet and whose plot points likely had not been finalized, and yet it got everything right. It feels like there's no shortage of ominous and mysterious figures in popular game franchises. Things like the elusive man from Mass Effect, Mr. Blue Eyes from Cyberpunk 2077, or the mysterious stranger from Fallout, some of which we'll cover later here. But maybe no NPC who lurks in the shadows is more well known and ubiquitous than the G-Man. Making an appearance in every single Half-Life game since the first, the G-Man is a bizarre male dressed in a suit who is periodically seen watching the player character from afar, or even sometimes interacting with us firsthand, speaking to us in a disciplined and methodical manner full of strange riddles and tongues. And whenever you are met with any of these haunting scenes in game, it quickly becomes apparent that this figure has a lot more going on than meets the eye, as he takes us to what seems like alternate dimensions, and speaks about tenebrous circumstances including benefactors we never see. So who exactly is the G-Man really then? Well, it's a question that has captivated the Half-Life fanbase for decades now, and even all these years later, it seems as if we're no closer to solving this mystery. First of all, for those of you that don't know, G-Man is actually a slang term that was created in the 1930s to reference American FBI agents who would often try to meddle in other people's affairs. The G in G-Man stands for government, so the term eventually was used in the context of any government officials and entities, most of which people didn't like all that much. However, in the context of Half-Life, we never get any full confirmation that this is what the G-Man actually refers to. In fact, he is never actually referred to or called the G-Man in actual gameplay. We only know of him by this name because in the game files, the actual character model used for the NPC is referred to as _G-Man in the codebase, as well as there being a few disparate diary entries from real-world game manuals that also refer to the character as the G-Man. But as you start to learn more about this very strange person, you realize that maybe G-Man doesn't refer to government at all, but actually God. Because you see, the G-Man doesn't seem to be like any other mere mortal. We know that during the development of Half-Life 1, the G-Man was originally supposed to be the administrator of the Black Mesa Top Secret Research Facility, or in other words, a human being that had a lot of jurisdiction and potentially some contact with alien entities who he referred to as his benefactors. But when construction on Half-Life 2 began, the executive decision was made to alter the G-Man into an even more mysterious and unknown figure, and retroactively this characterization was applied to the first game as well. In some developer commentary on the G-Man's creation during this period of time, we also get confirmation that the G-Man is meant to be some sort of otherworldly being or entity, something we can truly never understand. And this description seems a lot more accurate to what we actually experience in the most recent games. Often at the end of our adventures, the G-Man will come to us and either take all of our gear or congratulate us, and explain to us that he is a liaison between powerful people or benefactors, and that what is going on is all part of the plan, and that we've done well. And considering all we have seen, the G-Man seems as omnipotent as he is omniscient. It's hard not to take what he's saying at face value. And this further plays into the idea that the G-Man may actually be a god of sorts, who can travel through time and dimensions to orchestrate his own will. The really haunting question then though becomes, who exactly are the G-Man's so-called employers then? After all, who has the power to dictate what a god does? Theories range all over the map, including the G-Man being human experimentation gone wrong, where we can see references in the game manuals for the original game saying that the Black Mesa administration team gave Gordon Freeman, the player character, a letter signed using the initials LM, which could be a hint to the G-Man's real name, a person who was tortured before. Other prominent game theorists like Game Theory have speculated that the G-Man could be a Nihilith, the final boss we face at the end of the first game, which is a massive and creepy baby with a big brain-like figure that leads the alien Zen military forces that invade us in the first title. Another idea that makes sense to me would be that the G-Man is actually an interdimensional alien that is being sent from a galactic force of sentient multi-planet species to stop the Zen from gaining too much power, a sort of alien NATO that is patrolling the galaxy and making sure that no one entity gains too much influence and upsets the balance. Or maybe he is simply acting on behalf of some sort of future sect of humanity that is sending agents back into time to make sure that we can retain our dominance due to a set of key crucial moments that Gordon Freeman is involved in. This theory could even be backed up by multiple of the speeches that the G-Man gives us at the beginning and ending of the games, like at the start of Half-Life 2 when he expresses when talking to Gordon Freeman that your hour has come again. The right man in the wrong place can make all the difference in the world. So wake up, Mr. Freeman. Wake up and smell the ashes. Maybe the G-Man is hinting that he is trying to make sure that the right man is always in the right place, like a conductor leading a symphony or a chess master moving his pieces, all towards some grander goal. Truthfully though, the possibilities here are endless, and it's part of the reason why this mystery behind the G-Man is so interesting and has carried on in infamy for multiple decades now. The 90s were a fascinating time in games history, full of many experimental and strange titles that were truly unlike anything we've seen before or seen since. It was an era of ingenuity and innovation in an infantile industry, and led to the birth of many now beloved and respected mega franchises we see today. However, much less known to the general public, it also led to some of the most unsettling and truly horrifying experiences imaginable. Games that walked the line of the uncanny valley and almost seemed fake when we look at them nowadays. And without a doubt, one of the least well known yet most disturbing of all of these is a little gem known as Shine. Originally released in Germany and Russia using both languages in 1996, Shine immediately stood out, appearing as a demo CD-ROM in some magazines and convenience stores, and even as a full game in some local shops. If you actually managed to get your hand on the game at this time, you were met with one of the most terrifying and unexplainable things in history. You play as a character named Shine, who awakes in a bizarre mental asylum of sorts in a place called Twilight Town, where there is no day or night and all sorts of perplexing people and creatures alike roam the halls. The art style and vibes are a mix between hard metal punk rock and a cyberpunk fever dream, and these two are stitched together by a host of petrifying loud noises and sketchy visuals and instantly put you on edge.
ihn! Ich sah ihn! Auch wenn die beiden Cops da drin mir nicht glauben.
And as if it couldn't get any more confusing, the plot makes even less sense. The first person you meet is a woman named Natasha who talks to you in strange riddles and ciphers, and from here on out, the narratives and themes devolve into complete insanity, where you quite literally have no idea what's going on. Characters speak in multiple different languages like German, French, and Russian, while puzzles themselves are in English, which completely disorients any player unless they are a natural polyglot or someone fluent in a variety of languages and dialects. And on top of this, the majority of the actual story consists of nothing but hyper creepy and super short live action scenes where actors that look like they are being held captive against their will read gibberish from an incoherent script that makes no sense. The game itself plays like any standard action adventure, where you click around on the screen to make your way from one location to another, but even when you can pick up items in the environment to use in puzzles, there's no dedicated or coherent UI panel to actually manage them. So the further you get into the game, the more and more it becomes a mess of confusion and disarray. But considering that the entire journey takes place in a mental asylum, maybe that's the point. A slow dive into the mind of a person teetering on the edge of insanity who is seeing and hearing things they shouldn't in a place that might not even exist. And this premise only gets more horrifying when we consider that the actual creator of the game was a man who upon its completion completely disappeared never to be seen again, and no one can find any more information on him. Could it be that this random game from the 90s is actually a look into one man's twisted mind, or potentially even a serial killer revealing his antics? Well, truthfully, it's hard to tell, because the game itself is so hard to understand, and even if you try to look up things about it online, you will quickly be met with a dead end. Considering only a handful of people actually ever even got to play this game in its rumored original form, which potentially even was home to real videos of animal and human murder and torture, which could be why the game swiftly disappeared off store shelves afterwards. Nonetheless though, the biggest mystery around this strange game is just what it even is, and who the man behind it claims to be. And also, what is the bigger message behind the game itself, and especially the strange ending picking a replication mother or father and traveling deep inside what looks like a human body. Maybe the entire thing is a commentary on birth or life, or something about the human condition. And throughout the multitude of live action sequences we are treated to in game, we get tons of bizarre questions like, what is it all for? What needs to be done in the end? And it only adds to the intrigue here, as it's clear that the creator was trying to say something, but no one can figure out exactly what that something is. Or in other words, this game might just be a window into the mind of someone potentially very unwell and in need of help. And whether this is at the hands of a drug-induced bender or a mind detached from reality after kidnapping and murdering helpless individuals, or just a guy messing with us all, the mystery behind Shine is still one of the most fascinating in the video game industry and least well known out there. While for a lot of people, Yennefer from the Witcher series is the ideal romantic partner, for me, Triss Merigold is the one that stole my heart. But almost as if in a cruel twist of fate, there actually is a massive mystery lingering over this red-headed damsel that might reveal she isn't actually who she says she is at all, but rather a crazy psycho stalker. You see, in the Witcher books, during the First Northern War that saw Nilfgaard invading and taking over Sintra, at one point a catastrophic battle takes place on Sodden Hill where a handful of powerful mages fight against an army of Nilfgaardian zealots encroaching on their territory. And during this tussle, at one point a massive fireball propelled itself into the center of the mages' defenses and resulted in 14 of the 22 sorceresses losing their lives to explosions and grueling injuries. For the lucky few that did survive, most of them suffered contusions and burns that rendered their faces unrecognizable, and it was only through extensive medical care and magic use afterwards that they were able to once again live a normal life and regain the beauty and aesthetics they'd had before. The reason this is so interesting for us though is that Triss was apparently one of the mages mages that manage to survive and make a full recovery, which is why we get to talk to her in the games. But the thing is, what if the red-headed mage who survived this attack wasn't actually Triss Merigold at all, but actually Lydia Ned, otherwise known as Coral? In the books, Coral has a massive love for Geralt that he doesn't share for her, and at the time, she also incorrectly assumed that Triss and Geralt were lovers, which made her very angry and jealous. But even more interestingly, in the books, Coral herself is described as having bright red hair and green eyes, while Triss is described as having chestnut hair and blue eyes. And for any of you paying close attention, your alarm bells might be going off, because in the actual Witcher games, Triss dons bright red hair and green eyes, much more closely resembling Coral's description rather than Triss's. So the question then becomes, what gives? Could it be that Coral, after the catastrophe on Sodden Hill, saw an opportunity to disguise herself as Triss and win her true love Geralt back? After all, with the extensive scars that all of the mages now had, it was hard to tell who was who, and a scheme like this could easily have been pulled off. And we have a lot more evidence too. In the Sword and Destiny novel from the Witcher universe, Geralt and Triss are introduced as nothing more than friends, and neither of them make any especially notable moves. But in the book that takes place later in the timeline, and most notably after the Battle of Sodden Hill, Triss is described as literally being unable to sleep at night because of how strong her love for Geralt is. It's a very strange change to a character that comes out of nowhere and makes no sense. That is, unless you assume that Triss Merigold isn't actually the original one that Geralt met, but rather Coral now acting like her to win Geralt's affection. Another huge clue is that after the battle on Sodden Hill, suddenly Triss started to wear much less revealing clothing, which she said was because she was self-conscious of her scars, but considering how well her face healed, could it actually be she was trying to hide the massive fish tattoo she had that would have revealed she was Coral? At one point in the books, Triss mysteriously disappears saying she was sick. Maybe at that point, she was looking for a way to remove the tattoo, which she previously couldn't because she was allergic to the chemical compounds most doctors use to remove tattoos in the Witcher universe. And yet another perfect example of this mystery is when Triss brings Geralt to a lighthouse during one of her romance scenes in The Witcher 3, something that Coral did almost the exact same way much earlier on in the books. Even some of the magic we see Triss use in the games, like hydromancy, was something Coral was known to be proficient in early on in the books, not Triss. And finally, we have a smoking gun. In the Witcher games, during multiple cutscenes with the Jade figurine, Triss herself is actually referred to as Coral. And even though this is later revealed to be an honest mistake, it seems like a clear indication from CD Projekt Red that something more than meets the eye is going on here. And for me, it's without a doubt one of the coolest mysteries in the Witcher universe, and really makes you start to wonder whether one of the most important characters we have been talking to in the games isn't even who she says she is, but rather a crazy woman who will stop at nothing to make Geralt love her. Maybe that fireball that took out the mages on Sodden Hill so many years ago wasn't an accident after all, but instead, Coral devising a plan to become a completely different human being, all for one man's grisly voice and luscious hair. If you haven't already tried the Shadow of Mordor games based on the Lord of the Rings series, I highly recommend it. They play almost like an Assassin's Creed game in a fantasy setting, but even more interestingly, they have a mechanic called the Nemesis system, which aims to make every experience fresh and unique by allowing your orc adversaries to create their own stories and narratives on the fly. For example, if you kill an orc and his friends, later on in your same game, his brother might come along looking for vengeance and will even make reference to all of your previous deeds and what you did to his brother. It's a really cool system that keeps the game fresh, and I wish more titles tried to do something similar regardless of any copyrights. But as cool as systems like this are, they can also lead to some truly horrifying encounters, maybe none more strange and mysterious than the story of Bruz. Back in 2019, an IGN editor named Brendan Graeber had been talking with some colleagues and decided to go back and play one of his favorite games, which he had done a walkthrough for many years ago, Shadows of War, the sequel to Shadows of Mordor. But this time, when he loaded up a new game on a completely fresh save, something really creepy started started happening. You see, in the main campaign of the game, at one point you meet an orc named Bruz, who acts like your friend but later tries to betray you. Because of this devious act, years ago Brendan had shamed Bruz over and over again, which is a mechanic in-game where you can embarrass orc leaders to demoralize them and strip them of some power. And after doing this enough times back in his original save game, Bruz became an enraged killing machine with an entire army of orcs backing him up, trying to get revenge. But luckily for Brendan, now that he was years past this incident, he decided to create an entirely new save game where he would no longer have to deal with Super Bruz. However, to his horror, shortly after creating this new save file, the max level Bruz hellbent on vengeance once again reappeared. Brendan had to spend hours early on in the game running away from Bruz as he would chase him down, talking about his past deeds that occurred in a save that didn't even exist anymore. And even after meeting Bruz once again in his new main campaign, the old Bruz from his previously now deleted save file was still in the game. But now when looking for him on the map, he was described as being out of bounds, quite literally breaking the game's codebase in order to hide away and stalk Brandon no matter where he went. It's one of the craziest real-life encounters we've ever seen in a video game, and it makes you wonder how on earth the evil Bruz from one save file managed to move his way into a completely foreign spot in computer memory. Some even think that Bruz might be a great example of true artificial intelligence. And while it's likely just a creepy glitch that occurred when creating the new save file, considering that there have been multiple reports from people online about strange things happening like this in their games, it really does start to make you wonder. Some players online have even told tales of orcs in their games that start to reference them by their real-life names or personas, while other orcs seem to suddenly lose their minds and start to talk in parables and riddles, almost like they are suddenly gaining sentience. Regardless though, most of the events in the games like this with the Nemesis system are a mystery to this day, and it's one of the reasons my favorite type of games are systematic in nature, because they can give us memories like this that are so powerful and unique to each and every player. Sonic the Hedgehog is in no shortage of die-hard fans, and as with any franchise as beloved as this one, there are bound to be countless interesting mysteries and perplexing discoveries. And a handful of the most fascinating of these come from Sonic 2, which because of its co-development between Japanese and American developers was met with many struggles and a whole host of cut content that never saw the light of day. Many in the Sonic community have even made it their mission to dig into this title and its past, to unearth some of the ideas from this classical original that almost no one knows about. In fact, all this sleuthing has resulted in countless finds throughout the decades, even within the last couple of years as well, with entire new zones, enemies, storylines, and main characters being discussed that would have completely changed Sonic as we know it had they come to fruition. But out of all of these finds, none of them quite reached the unnerving and disturbing level of one particular image that was recently found. You see, in a 2004 interview with one of the game developers, Tom Payne, he mentioned that he had a secret stash of cut content related to Sonic 2, as well as endless pages of documentation and notes which the world needed to see. But for years after this, many of these apparently revolutionary documents remained shrouded in secrecy. That was until a chance meeting in April of 2019 between Tom Payne and Jason Morehouse, an owner of a California-based retro game store, at a garage sale. At the garage sale, the two randomly brought up their shared love of Sonic, and when Tom revealed he had a massive box of secrets sitting in his house on the second game's development, Jason was foaming at the mouth. Eventually, this led to Jason and a small team of investigators getting their hands on everything that Tom had, which included lots of cut levels and items the fanbase never even knew existed at all. However, it was also at this point that one investigator named Bob Morgan unearthed one very peculiar image in some of the sprite storage memory bins that sent shivers down his spine. Now affectionately called bobnface.png, the image depicts a sadistic man in a green tuxedo holding up a peace sign while seemingly half of his face is being erased, and a smile contorted to non-human proportions. Behind him, almost etched into the side of what looks to be a building, is a copy of a similar face, but with a much more evil look, almost framed in the image of a man in a bloodthirsty rage, but also with most of his face missing. On top of this, the man in the green tuxedo seems to have what is a bullet hole, along with red and blue blood strewing down his outfit, and a host of very blocky and creepy colors elsewhere all behind him. And not only is this image one of the only of its kind in the entire codebase, but it also has no immediately obvious tie-ins to Sonic, making it even more horrifying. So what on earth is this chilling picture doing in the development folder for Sonic 2? Well, if you dig deeper into the files that Bob uncovered during his investigation, you will also find a set of 6 smaller images, each one depicting this same man with a different set of expressions, with each more alarming than the last. So obviously then, this strange man must have been purposely included here. And in fact, if we zoom in on one of the gray brick level setup images in the same folder, we also see blocks that are covered in human faces, presumably this same man's. Without a doubt, these creepy photos and their inclusion in the Sonic 2 development kit is no mistake, but it also begs the question, what was going on here? Some in the community have guessed it may actually be cut art for an unreleased Mega Drive game called Spinny and Spike vs. the Nightmare King, while others have pointed out how closely these images resemble popular serial killers or even some of the managerial staff working on Sonic 2 at the time. But regardless of whether these images came from disgruntled employees, another game, or even an evil team member with a fascination with serial killers and murder, the mystery to this day still remains unsolved. The Mass Effect series is without question one of the most fascinating and engrossing worlds ever created for a video game. And a big part of that is all of the unsolved mysteries and questions that the universe left for us to discover that to this day are still being talked about. But in my opinion, the greatest of all of these might also be one of the smallest, that a large portion of the player base doesn't even know about. You see, in every Mass Effect game, a crucial part of the gameplay loop is heading back to your ship, the Normandy, after every mission and opening up the galaxy map to see where you want to go next. And during this downtime, you also are given the opportunity to explore the galaxy a little bit, to check out planets off the beaten path. In the second game, for example, this means deploying probes to gather resources. In the third, it's capturing weapons and infantry units to join you in your fight against the Reapers. And in the first game, sometimes it even includes touching down on barren planets themselves to drive around and explore. But regardless of the specific title, one of the best parts of these sections is also getting to just read the descriptions of each and every planet you come across and soak up the world building and lore that this series is so well known for. However, while many of these planets simply have descriptions of the atmosphere and history, some are hiding a lot more. And out of all of these, maybe none are more mysterious and terrifying than Logan. Found in the first Mass Effect, in my opinion the best Mass Effect game ever made, Logan is an unassuming gas giant located in the Theseus system of the Attican Beta cluster of the Milky Way. It has no standout features, no main or side missions, and is one of the shortest planet descriptions in the entire game. But even with the few words we do get to hear about this strange place, you can't help but instantly feel captivated. The planet description in-game reads as follows. Logan is a standard hydrogen-helium gas giant. The survey team who charted the system 20 years ago reported many strange disturbances in Logan's clouds, suggesting that many remarkably large solid objects were present beneath the cloud tops. As the ship approached, however, they subsided one by one. These disturbances have never been reported again. So what exactly were these mysterious large objects beneath the clouds on Logan then? And even more interestingly, why have we never heard from them ever since? Some in the community think that they could have been massive helium-3 mining rigs that are being used by covert illicit mining operators of Volus Imperialis. But if that were the case, you would think that someone would have picked up on it by now. And also, it would be strange that these operations would never pick up again, assuming the scale that they must have been on to be picked up by ship scanners. And this is where things get interesting. What if the readings that came up on that ship's scanner were actually Leviathans? For those of you that don't know, Leviathans were revealed in the third game to be the original organic race that developed the hyper-intelligent machine species known as the Reapers, whose prime directive was to protect life, and in doing so, they decided that every 50,000 years, all sufficiently intelligent organic life would need to be purged in order to keep the galaxy afloat indefinitely and preserve organic thought. This is because because the Reapers determined that the organisms otherwise would always lead themselves to their own doom through creation of things like hostile artificial intelligence. So over millions of years, this cycle has continued on, with the Reapers every 50,000 years killing most of the life in the Milky Way and allowing the primitive species to survive in order to once again eventually discover the massive Citadel space station that will propel their technology forward while secretly allowing the Reapers to watch them. So what if those ship scanner readings on Logan were actually some hidden Leviathans themselves? After all, we know from the Leviathan DLC in the third game that some others are hidden in the galaxy that have still yet to be found. And potentially even more cool, what if those readings are actually an undiscovered race from a previous cycle that is secretly pulling the strings of the main campaign behind the scenes and slowly leading the Reapers to their doom? Maybe the mystery of the Thorian and its power of mind control and where it comes from can be solved on Logan. Maybe the virtual aliens or the idea of a race that put their consciousness in massive supercomputers to sail through the stars is actually hiding here. But really, the ideas and things that Logan could be are endless, and as to what was really picked up on the scanners that day, we may never know. Truly, one of the coolest and most unassuming game mysteries out there, not only because it's fascinating in its own right, but because it would fit so perfectly into a future story in the franchise, or could even tie into the next game's main plot perfectly. And more than anything, it's the best example of why I think Mass Effect 1 is the best in the series. There are just so many mysteries in that game like this one, that even in just one paragraph can make your imagination go wild with possibilities and make you want to dive into the universe and its lore more and more. It feels like it's been way too long since we last got a new entry in the Sims series. I distinctly remember growing up playing the earlier titles all the time, and it's just the type of game that pretty much anyone can enjoy and have fun with. But for those that bought The Sims 2 for the Nintendo DS, they had a huge surprise in store waiting for them, because this version of The Sims was unlike any other made before or any made since, focusing less on living life in a suburban household and more on one of the most drug-induced and wacky adventures of a lifetime, with a grand mystery looming over its creation. You see, in The Sims 2 DS, you start the game as a random sim who has been assigned as the new manager at a creepy hotel in a deserted area known as Strangetown. When you first arrive, your initial task is to find a literal nuclear fuel rod sitting just outside in the sand to power a generator in the basement, and things only start to get more unbelievable after this. You are introduced to a host of strange and peculiar people that almost make it seem like you are living out a dream, and eventually you are shown to your room, which is composed of psychedelic colors and a random stage platform in the middle of your living room, which makes no sense, along with demonic worshipping symbolism everywhere. And just when you thought things couldn't get any weirder, suddenly aliens invade the hotel after you have scraped poop off the bathroom toilets, and all hell breaks loose. The mafia and demonic cults start to get involved, and part of the main story is about teaching kids how gambling is a great way to make money, all while you have to engage in subtle human sacrifice trials and drug-induced benders that see you diving into the lore of Strangetown and its unnerving people. And truthfully, it's just one of the most insane and mentally deranged games out there, with so many subtle, violent, and sadistic themes that have no place in a game primarily made for kids. So it starts to make you wonder, how on earth did this game get approved? Developed by Amaze Entertainment, the studio was already known for making wacky DS titles, but The Sims 2 DS pushed this envelope to levels never seen before, and considering EA themselves was watching over the development, it's absurd to think this even got approved. In fact, the original pitches for the game were even wilder than what we actually got, with the creators begging EA to allow them to make the story from the first-person perspective of a parasitic amoeba that controlled the brain of a host sim that you could then secretly murder people with and eat their organs. It's such a preposterous premise that it almost sounds fake or like some creepypasta that someone made up on the internet, but no, this game actually exists. And there are multiple moments throughout the story full of dark themes, as well as mummified human beings being held captive, people that are trying to set houses or different rooms on fire to get back at adversaries, or countless random events like an interdimensional robot who storms into the building out of nowhere with no explanation for no reason and starts asking to clean things up. Essentially, it's like playing The Sims, but if you decided to take a megadose of LSD beforehand and had no one to help you. And when you combine this with some truly dark and brutal moments, you start to realize why so many young kids reported being psychologically damaged by this title at the time. I mean, seriously, imagine being an 8-year-old who played The Sims 2 on PC and decided to pick up the DS version, only to find yourself being asked by the mob to bury a wriggling suitcase in the desert and never speak about it again. So the big unanswered mystery then is clearly, how did this title even get greenlit and released by EA, one of the biggest video game publishers in the world with a lot to lose, especially when it was attached to such a beloved franchise that was associated with families and children. It's practically a lawsuit and controversy waiting to happen. But then again, The Sims has always been known for strange and wacky things, but never anything to this extent that's so violent and deranged. And when you combine this with a lot of mystery surrounding the actual development of this title and how it even came to be, it makes you think about how this all even happened in the first place. The Stanley Parable is one of the most unique and uncanny experiences in games, full stop. You play as a man named Stanley, trapped in the never-ending liminal spaces of your office building, alone and afraid. And as you make your way through this facility, an optimistic and friendly British voice leads you along, telling the story of one man named Stanley and the journey he goes on.
Stanley took the first open door on his left. Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago. But in his eagerness to prove that he is in control of the story and no one gets to tell him what to do, Stanley leapt from the platform and plunged to his death.
It's a title full of jokes, sarcasm, and dark humor. And as a kid, I remember playing the original after listening to Total Biscuit talk about it, and I instantly fell in love with the series. But maybe the biggest reason for that was that behind the game's creepy facade lies even stranger and more haunting mysteries, maybe none of which are more fascinating than the Watching Man. Seen only under very specific conditions, like the no buckets ending or after restarting your game multiple times, this strange figure lies just out of reach and is also the only other human being you ever see. The first time you encounter this stranger is when walking past one of the work cubicles right at the start of the game. If you look directly to your right after entering the second office unit, you will for a brief moment see a man through a window walking slowly in the other room. The reason this stands out so much though is that Stanley is supposed to be the only person left alive in the building. Even the narrator himself makes reference to this multiple times. But clearly, someone or something else is inside this building with you. If you make your way over to a computer with all employee records, while scanning through the database, the security system notes that there actually are two people in the office, one being you, Stanley, and the other an unidentified entity. So it seems clear then that there really might be someone else inside this hellish building with you. But the question then becomes, who is this man? Some in the community have begun to speculate that this mystery man may actually be none other than Employee 432, who based on in-game files we can find was a top secret test subject undergoing mind control trials that seem to have gone wrong. In the mind control facility chambers, we can even find a report that notes that Employee 432 at one point asked Employee 431 for a pencil, and if we investigate the area, we discover a huge box labeled 432 that is stuffed to the brim with pencil sharpeners. The truly horrifying part though is that after discovering this box, if we leave and then come back, it disappears. Someone must have moved that box, and considering the only living beings inside these walls are you and this watching man, he seems to be the most likely culprit for who Employee 432 is. On top of this, there are multiple very short windows in which we can see the man standing on ledges or in rooms far away for a split second, watching you as you go through the facility. And even in one of the original Stanley Parable Deluxe Edition trailers, we can see the man for a half second behind one of the doors the player is looking at. So who exactly is this watching man then? He clearly has extensive access to the office and its inner workings, even more so than us, and has even managed to evade the watchful eye of our omnipotent and omniscient narrator for most of this time, except for one instance where when you restart the game, the narrator does make the haunting revelation that we're no longer alone. And on top of this, his outfit just doesn't seem to fit the location. If this man was our boss, you would expect to see him in a suit, and if he was a co-worker, he would be wearing a company assigned ensemble like Stanley. Well, if we you look into the game files on this strange man specifically, things only get weirder, because in the game files, the watching man is actually referred to as A-Man0002, which after more extensive research actually is a shorthand designator for Airport Man version 2. But what on earth does an airport man have anything to do with the Stanley Parable? Well, some of the new content in the deluxe edition actually sees us going outside of the facility for the first time, at least from our vantage point, which might imply that there's also a lot more going on at this place than we originally thought, where potentially the airport man could be some sort of Illuminati or godlike figure behind the scenes pulling the strings outside in the real world while keeping us inside, trapped like a mouse in a cage. Probably my favorite part about watching speedruns in games is listening to explanations on how different exploits or speed-ups were found, and deep dives into the code and architecture behind some of the biggest titles and devices that show how resourceful the speedrunning community really is. And within this sect of gamers, maybe no game is more ubiquitous than Super Mario 64, which coincidentally is also home to some of the biggest mysteries in speedrunning history, of which one of the coolest is an upwarp that happened back in 2013. For those of you that don't know, in Mario 64, speedrunners commonly use a tactic called upwarping, which allows them to quickly traverse to higher points on the map without much effort. Usually, in order to pull this maneuver off, a player must perfectly propel themselves into a direct angle in a ceiling that is sitting under another hangable ceiling. And if they hit the lower ceiling just right, Mario will instantly teleport or upwarp onto the hangable ledge above. It's just one of many tactics that speedrunners use to save time, but the thing about it is it's only supposed to happen under those specific conditions. Well, that is unless you're one speedrunner known as Dota Teabag, who over a decade ago in September of 2013 kicked off a series of events that would light the speedrunning community on fire. You see, back in 2013, Dota Teabag and his buddy were streaming a competition of sorts to see who could hit the better speedrun on that day. But partway through, the now infamous incident occurred. Out of nowhere, while jumping in no man's land, and just as he hit the bottom of a platform, Dota Teabag was instantly upwarped directly above himself with no effort at all. A clip was made of the incident immediately, and Dota Teabag and others were suspicious of what even just happened. But for years, the clip sat with almost no views or attention, and it seemed as if this strange upwarp would simply be forgotten to time. That was until in 2015 when one popular speedrunning streamer stumbled upon the Twitch clip, and without second thought started to get the word out about this insane event that had no explanation. In no time, bounties worth over $1,000 were being put up online for someone to solve the mystery, with many people giving it a shot, but to no avail. In some YouTube comments on a popular video about the incident though, some people came up with an absolutely insane explanation. Potentially, the random upwarp could have been the cause of a bit flip. You see, bit flips have been known to happen from time to time in the speedrunning community, and in this case, the assumption was that maybe the bit for Mario's height in memory at the exact moment had been flipped, causing his vertical position in 3D space to immediately alter itself, resulting in the upwarp. In fact, some investigators were even able to test this theory, and created clips that looked almost identical to what happened with Dota Teabag at the exact same spot. The problem was though, if it was just a bit flip, then what caused it? Well, once again, the YouTube comment section had a crackpot theory. Maybe the bit flip had been the result of some sort of ionized particle radiation interference. After all, ionized particles have been shown to flip bits in computer systems before, but that would mean that quite literally a cosmic ray from the sun would have had to have penetrated the Earth's atmosphere and assaulted Dota Teabag's Nintendo 64 at the exact time of the stream, which without a doubt is one of the craziest theories out there. But no one had any better ideas. And so the mystery of this strange event only grew, with one investigator even buying Dota Teabag's Nintendo 64 and Mario cartridge after he explained that he even had hardware issues at the time. But after deep investigation into the internal hardware, nothing strange came up. Many in the community though even speculated that maybe the upwarp could have been the result of faulty bin connections between the cartridge and N64, or maybe that the glitch had been the result of a cart slap, where players hitting their own consoles during gameplay gameplay can shift pins or bits in memory that will cause strange things to happen in game, something with documented proof of happening before. But even now, over a decade later, we still don't know exactly what happened on that fateful day in 2013. Maybe the glitch wasn't even caused by a bit flip in the first place, or even a hardware malfunction due to electromagnetic interference, for instance, but rather some sort of mechanism in the game itself that no one's been able to replicate so far. After all, we do have some specific instances in other places of strange things happening in game that later are revealed to be tricks that anyone can use. It's one of the reasons people look into things like this so much in the speedrunning community. It's how you start improving times even years later. Regardless though, the Cosmic Ray speedrun is a perfect example of what makes the speedrunning community itself so fascinating. Peculiar events and intriguing mysteries full of crazy storylines and investigations, all with the potential to discover new tricks that can once again allow players to beat records previously thought unstoppable. Back in December of 2021, during the throes of lockdowns across the world due to contagion, there was another illness that was brewing, and that disease was the coming release of the disturbing game known as Teosita. It's a psychological horror puzzle platformer that was developed by Vikinter Interactive, the creative minds behind its prequel as well, Tamahashi. In Teosita, you take the reins of an unknown character who's trapped in a nightmarish microcosm of a twisted universe, where eccentric symbolism of faith and erotic images dot the landscape, full of surreal and eerie sounds and background noise that really put you on the edge of your seat the entire time you play. And as would be expected with any type of game like this, especially from a studio dedicated to making disorienting things, there are a lot of mysteries and secrets to uncover in game. But maybe none are more terrifying and concerning than one mystery that was uncovered by the Oddhead YouTube channel and their fan base. Which, by the way, if you like things like this, his channel and community are amazing. I highly recommend checking them out. When any player first starts the game, they are presented with this dark and foreboding room with some computers in it that you must tap on to start the story. But if you instead spin your character around 180 a la Call of Duty Black Ops, you will instead find behind you an ominous door barely captured by a flood of light above that illuminates its frame. If you step inside this door, you are met with another room and yet another door, this time surrounded by a host of buttons that look like they need a specific combination. And lo and behold, if you check a sheet of paper on a table next to you, it contains a page of French text ciphers and unrecognizable symbols, which if cracked, allow you to gain a combination to the door. Once passed, you are met with yet another room, but this time with nothing but almost pitch black darkness and a staircase leading even deeper into the lair. At the bottom of the staircase lies a dilapidated underground brick cavern with a tablet at the far end of its frame, and yet another cipher full of alien symbolism, this time written in broken Portuguese. And once deciphered, we get nothing more than a strange message about how the heavens and hells are both trying to defeat the work of the devil, which is mostly incoherent blabber. Where things start to get absolutely insane though, is when some players data mine the game files in order to find more answers. Hidden within the files themselves are a handful of images that have the same in-game file label as assets found in this room. And when viewing the images for ourselves, we are bombarded with truly petrifying things like babies being torn apart, or what looks to be a stalker in real-life people's apartment buildings taking pictures late at night. And most disturbing of all is one image that simply says, "Super secret discovered. We don't know how you got this far. Your reward will be available in the hub area." But what exactly is this reward? And where is the hub area the game is talking about? Did the developers know we would eventually discover this, or could it be the start of something even greater? To this day, we still have no definitive answers, but some of the data mined images have been examined more and revealed to have strange music and sounds that accompany them, which only heighten the tension and creepy factor of each of them. But who or what took these photos in the first place? After all, a good handful of them don't exactly look legal, and it makes you question if Teosita might be even more demented than just the gameplay would suggest. Because when I look at that image about our reward and see the continue button that leads to nowhere, it makes me think that maybe there's more to this mystery than we already know, and there might just be a way to open a can of worms, the likes of which we never could have imagined. The Dwemer, otherwise known as the People of the Deep, are without a doubt one of the most well-known and discussed mysteries in the Elder Scrolls. And that's saying a lot, coming from a series that has monsters like the Deep Ones, ancient planes of existence that spawned out of betrayal, and the actual Elder Scrolls themselves, which the series is based on. For the Dwemer though, what makes them so interesting is that we've seen remnants of their civilization, and in one instance, even their own people in games like Morrowind, Oblivion, and Skyrim. But within each of these, it always seems like we end up with more questions about this mysterious race of people than answers. First of all, the dwarves themselves were very advanced, so much so that the tales of their technology dwarf what even modern-day Skyrim or Cyrodiil is able to muster. Deep underground, these ancient elven dwarf hybrids constructed miles of beautiful and decadent megastructures and societies out of the rocks strewn in gold, and they were only able to do so because of their mastery of what they called tonal architecture. By building massive acoustic contraptions and wind tunnels, the Dwemer elite gained mastery over the sounds and vibrations of the cosmos itself, and with them the ability to bend reality and the fabric of the universe. This power was used to terraform massive portions deep underground all around Tamriel, the continent the Elder Scrolls series takes place on, and it was said that the Dwemer were so powerful during their heyday that they defied the gods themselves, instead seeing them as equals that they could one day usurp. For the Dwemer, the Daedra and Aedra godlike figures in the astral planes that surrounded the mortal plane of Mundus were nothing more than emotional and selfish beings whose power came from understanding of the nature of the universe, something the Dwemer intended to understand as well. And for thousands of years, the Dwemer continued to build great cities underground while harnessing greater understanding of smithing and building, leading to them becoming the most revered blacksmiths of all time, crafting great machines and engines that could be given their own form of consciousness to serve and fight on behalf of their creators. But still, so much from this time and what exactly the Dwemer were up to is unknown. We know that at one point in the northern region of Skyrim, for instance, they offered the Snow Elves salvation from a war they were fighting with the invading Nords, but in order to give them shelter underground, the Dwemer forced the Snow Elves to make a pact to ingest a toxic fungi, which subsequently turned them into feral blind monsters called the Falmer, which were kept in cages and forced to serve the Dwemer, but to what end we're not entirely sure. So all over Tamriel for a long time, this ancient hyper-advanced and strange race was meddling in affairs, and building things that we could only ever imagine in our dreams. But the real strangest part is yet to come, because the real mystery behind the Dwemer came during a now historic event called the Battle at Red Mountain. Many years ago in the lands of Morrowind, the Dwemer were in a heated conflict and war with a race known as the Chimer, elves that would eventually become the Dark Elves that we can play as in the games today. And realizing that they would soon succumb to defeat at the hands of these twisted elves, the leadership of the Dwemer at Red Mountain, one of the biggest footholds, decided to take drastic action. Deep within the Red Mountain lied an Aedric artifact known as the Heart of Lorkhan. This heart was ripped from Lorkhan when he first betrayed the Aedra and created the mortal realm of Mundus that Tamriel takes place in. And inside this heart was said to lie powers beyond imagination that needed to be hidden forever. But now on the back foot, the Dwemer made the fateful decision to fully excavate the heart, waking it from its slumber, hoping that it could save their people. And what happened next is the biggest mystery in the entire Elder Scrolls series. In one instantaneous flash of light, in the heart of bloody battle with the Chimer, the Dwemer simply disappeared. All of their people above ground fighting, all of their merchants and cities, all of their women, children, and men deep underground suddenly vanished without a trace. Their massive cities underground and autonomous contraptions suddenly were barren, and all across Tamriel a shiver was sent down the spines of all creatures, as one of the most prominent peoples was in but a moment erased from the history books. As to what happened on that day, we still do not know, and probably never will. It could be that Lorkhan's heart teleported the Dwemer into the realm of the Aedra where they could finally become like the gods they always wanted, or maybe breakthroughs in their technology and tonal architecture had allowed them to finally fully master the power of time itself, allowing them to teleport instantly into the past or future with the help of the heart. And truly, the possibilities here are endless, and it makes all the small tidbits of lore we get about them so much more fascinating, like walking around these now ancient Dwemer ruins underground in the game game, it's just so exciting because we know that there used to be a people here that were more advanced than anything that has come even 1,000 years later. Or in other words, the closest any mortal beings have ever come to being gods as a people. In Morrowind, we even actually do get to meet one surviving Dwemer as well deep within a cave hiding away, who does give us a little bit of backstory on his people and customs, but still no definitive answers as to what really happened at Red Mountain that day. A mystery that in all honesty should stay a mystery forever, as it's part of what makes the Elder Scrolls series so enthralling in the first place, and why we can talk about interesting things like this in its lore even years later. The story of Polybius is one of the most well-known unsolved mysteries in gaming history, that to this day has not gotten any actual final and definitive solution. As the myth goes, back in Portland, Oregon in November of 1981, a new and unassuming black box arcade machine was secretly introduced into some local arcades in the area. Called Polybius, it was said to have a strange sequence of numbers and letters that would play on screen, with fast-paced flashing lights you would fly through in a blaze of glory. But the even more sinister and mysterious part about it was that the arcade machine would apparently give anyone that played it an extreme addiction that would lead to bouts of nausea, vomiting, and even self-harm tendencies. And to only add to the oddity, there were multiple reports that shadowy men in black suits and government agents would periodically come into the arcades and secretly take the Polybius machines away, apparently for further analysis. Or in other words, the urban legend postulates that the US government had actually created a new harmful arcade machine in the 80s, which was secretly being planted in Portland arcades in order to try and run some sort of study on innocent children and players. And as we know, around this same time in the 70s in the US, the government had actually done something similar, which we've learned about in declassified documents of MKUltra, where it's been proven that the US government did at one point inject unwitting and innocent US citizens with harmful hallucinogenic drugs and contagions in order to study their effects, and in a bid to see if they could find a serum for true mind control. So considering this is a confirmed and real thing, imagining that FBI agents would try to run a similar test using arcade machines isn't so far-fetched after all. In fact, in the 1980s, there were actually multiple reports of children and adults getting sick playing games for too long in Portland. And also, local police stations and FBI did actually raid Portland arcades around the same time as the Polybius rumor, but for concerns about illicit drug use and selling, not because they were doing underground testing, at least as far as we know. So it's not hard to see why people would believe the story of Polybius though. However, there's never been any actual first-hand proof that the mysterious arcade box ever existed. We do know that Portland at the time was a hotbed area for new game creators to test out their latest arcade boxes, with many arcades having multiple black box machines that were not seen anywhere else and quickly disappear. But most of these have been documented and proven, which is not the case for Polybius. The most likely explanation then is that an aspiring writer or jokester like Kevin Mannis, one of the assumed creators of the Polybius story, saw an opportunity with all of the hysteria to make a fun urban legend that would get people to freak out. It was believable enough considering the state of Portland arcades at the time, along with a general distrust of the populace towards their own government in the 80s. However, there have been some individuals that have come out and claimed to have actually worked on the arcade game itself, stating that it was a top secret government project that they were told very little about. But none of these apparent game developers or people involved with the Polybius project have been able to actually provide any definitive proof or statements. Meaning where we stand now is at the corner of a story that is likely nothing but a hoax, which originated from a post on a fringe website years ago called coinop.org, likely where the original writer of the story tried to create a fake narrative for their own amusement, which eventually got picked up years later by gaming publications, which made it go mainstream. Or we could also be seeing the remnants of a government mind control conspiracy that almost was conducted undetected, but was unearthed by some sleuthing and is now trying to be obfuscated by FBI agents in order to make it seem fake. Probably not that, but considering that the US government and also almost every government on the planet has at one point had documented and now unclassified evidence of killing or planning to kill and harm their own citizens for their own sick gain, maybe believing something like Polybius is too far-fetched to actually be real is the real conspiracy theory. When I was a kid, one of my favorite guilty pleasure games, without a doubt, was Saints Row 2. It's a series that is as wacky as it is fun, and while Grand Theft Auto has always been the bigger draw, there was a point in time where the Saints Row franchise was giving it a run for its money. But while the series is known for tons of strange and weird Easter eggs and secrets, maybe none are more insane and mysterious than the peculiar sighting of a shadowy figure known as the Freezer. Shortly after the release of the game, some players began to notice that under certain sets of conditions when playing the Zombie Uprising minigame, their game would not only freeze and their disc potentially get damaged, but right at the same time of it happening, a dark and ominous figure would appear only for a half second on screen. In order to get this event to occur, you have to load into the Zombie Uprising minigame, and when you unlock grenades, head over to a nearby balcony and propel yourself onto the top of the building by ragdolling your body upwards, after which a glitch will occur where you suddenly appear on the streets of the city. From this point onward, you are constantly being stalked by this shadowy creature, and once it finds you, your game will immediately freeze, and under extreme circumstances, which occur more frequently on the Xbox 360 version of the game, your disc will even get scratched and the game will remain unplayable forever. Multiple players reported seeing this event occur, and we even have first-hand video evidence of how it happened and what the shadowy figure looks like. However, what we don't have is any concrete explanations. Potentially the most likely thing though would be that the Freezer is actually nothing more than a 2D shadow render of an NPC, which are used in the game all over the place for faraway characters to maintain performance. But still, that doesn't explain why this figure is following us everywhere. And also, this would have to be an especially bad glitch, considering it can break game discs and was even known to give some Xbox 360 users the ring of death on their console hardware, meaning they no longer could play any games at all. Regardless, it's one of the coolest unsolved mysteries from the series, and unlike many others out there, it's not just something creepy that takes up our headspace, but rather a mystery that can quite literally break your hardware you've spent hundreds of dollars on. The loss of a loved one is one of the most tragic things we can experience in life, and that tragedy only gets amplified tenfold when it relates to the casualty of a child. So in the 1990s, when supposedly nearly 200 children took their lives in a short period of time in Japan, there was rightfully cause for mass concern and hysteria. But strangely, one of the main culprits behind this phenomenon actually turned out to be the last thing you think would be harming children: Pokemon. Just before many of the tragedies started to occur, the Pokemon Company had released their latest game, the famous Pokemon Red and Blue series. It's actually the first one I played as a kid, so this one really hits home. But apparently, there was one specific level in the game that was quite literally making children go insane. You see, in Red and Blue, at one point during the main story, you make your way to a place called Lavender Town. It's one of the only locations in the entire game series that isn't home to a special trainer gym you need to beat, and that's because in its place is a massive and foreboding megastructure known as the Pokemon Tower. Inside the tower lies a wasteland filled to the brim with death and decay. Beneath the floorboards and in a series of mummified tombs lie the lifeless bodies of Pokemon sent to their doom. And on each floor are tons of ghost-type Pokemon that still haunt the halls, along with one specific demon Pokemon that is wreaking havoc. And on top of this, when you first arrive, you will find countless trainers crying and mourning the loss of their dead best friends, along with others who have seemingly lost their minds and turned feral that you must fend off. And as if it couldn't get any worse, as you make your way through the tower, you are accompanied by never-ending and unsettling music that gets creepier and creepier the more you listen. It's far and away the darkest and most sinister place we've seen in Pokemon history, and considering that this is a game made for kids, it's frightening just how horrifying this place really is, and it shows why so many people believed it to be haunted in real life too. Because during this time of mass hysteria in Japan due to the loss of so many children, many parents were said to have been making accusations that this specific level had been the culprit. Apparently, there were hidden high-pitched frequencies in the music that only children's eardrums could pick up on that were specifically designed to induce crippling paranoia and bouts of depression. And on top of this, reports came out that some of the light strobing in this level was also designed around specific photon receptors in eyes that are more capable to be seen as children that we lose over time, which would flash images of death and sadness to children while they played. Or in other words, the idea was that developers of the most recent Pokemon game had deliberately crafted an experience that would be deadly to children while remaining undetected for adults. Truthfully, it's one of the most absurd accusations I've heard of in a while, but where things start to get really crazy is when you find out why they weren't actually all that unfounded. Around the same time of this incident, the Pokemon series had released a new episode of the anime TV show, which included two highly controversial animation techniques known as Paka Paka and Flash in Japan. Both of these techniques combined fast-paced, high-frequency lights emitting consistently with a flush of colors all over, and these deadly combinations literally induced seizures and vomiting in over 100 verified reported cases in Japan. So as outlandish and paranoid as the initial Lavender Town Syndrome reports seem, there was actual first-hand evidence that the Pokemon Company could in fact harm children using cute Pokemon. To this day though, there's never been any actual proof that the Lavender Town Syndrome exists, and considering things like the language barrier between Japan and the United States where most people talk about this, it's easy to see how things might have been blown out of proportion. I will say though that after listening to the song used in this level along with watching a lot of footage, it really does give off a creepy vibe. But I wouldn't say I feel especially depressed, I just have a big headache. And by the way, for anyone watching this, you've actually been listening to the music and watching the footage for some time now. So let me know down below if you're feeling anything weird. And if you aren't, it could be because of rumors that only certain cartridges of Pokemon Red and Blue were actually designed to kill, and only a couple of these crazy copies are left in the wild for us to one day discover the truth. So could the Pokemon Company actually be a sadistic cult of child killers that are systematically trying to take over the world one child tragedy at a time? No, but it's fun to think so. If you've played any of the mainline Fallout games, you've likely at some point in your travels stumbled upon this absolute stud, otherwise known as the Mysterious Stranger. And just as the name would imply, he truly is quite elusive. In the first and second Fallout games, the isometric ones from Black Isle Studios and Interplay, the Stranger will appear periodically in your travels as either a man or a woman, usually in dire times of need helping you vanquish enemies. But if you try to talk to the individual afterwards, they will always ignore you or simply state that they're there to protect and will not talk. In Fallout 3 in New Vegas, you can once again find this Mysterious Stranger, but this time in all their 3D glory and also sporting a special Magnum pistol, which when holstered and unholstered plays a little Western jingle, probably a nod to the detective noir and Western vibes that the character gives off. And finally, in Fallout 4 and 76, we once again will stumble upon the Mysterious Stranger frequently, willing to help us out either when going down in battle or watching from afar over our most important moments. However, most peculiar of all, despite seeing this trenchcoat loving maniac throughout multiple games that take place over hundreds of years, we're no closer to figuring out the real identity of this figure. What we do have though is a lot of odd evidence. First of all, in Fallout New Vegas, we're able to meet a man named the Lonesome Drifter, who if we inquire about more, will tell us that he was abandoned by his dad at a young age and forced to figure out how to survive with his mother. It's something that we would expect to be commonplace in the dystopian world of Fallout, and thus it's not very notable at first. But where things get extremely interesting is if we actually look at the pistol the Lonesome Drifter is holding, none other than the Mysterious Stranger's prized Magnum, sporting the same exact Western rift from before. Trying to get more information about this out of the Lonesome Drifter doesn't lead us very far, but it still does give us a big hint that the Mysterious Stranger is likely this man's father, and that he for some reason abandoned his family to presumably watch over you. But the man's secret identity doesn't stop there, because if we look at the Fallout official game guide, things get even more crazy. In the pages of this helpful companion to the game, we are told that the Mysterious Stranger is an angel-like figure of sorts, who stalks the player and assures their survival, and even more horrifyingly, is also not listed as a man, but an unknown being. But how could this be the case? After all, isn't the Mysterious Stranger the father of the Lonesome Drifter, who is a real human being? Well, in Fallout 4, if we investigate some of Nick Valentine's secret stash of intel, we can come across a page he has gathered on the Mysterious Stranger himself, where he notes how he is always one step ahead and lurking in the shadows. And here Nick makes the impressive guess that the Mysterious Stranger might actually be the Mysterious Stranger, multiple men and women that are part of a shadowy organization. And yet, even with all this, we still have no idea who this man, woman, or thing really is. Multiple theories in the community have sprung up, ranging from Vault-Tec scientists from the future trying to time travel to ensure we survive and enable some big event, secret Enclave members that have a vested interest in the player character, all the way down to the mysterious stranger being Santa Claus, who had to figure out something else to do after he could no longer deliver presents around the world for Christmas. And yes, the theory actually has some compelling evidence to back it up. But maybe the most likely theory, based on all of the evidence we have before us, is that the mysterious stranger, as his name implies, is something we cannot fully understand. Potentially, the figure could be an eldritch being of sorts that for some reason has taken an interest in us as the player, and maybe is even trying to break the fourth wall in order to communicate with us in the real world somehow. Bethesda probably won't ever give us a definitive answer though, and I think that's for the better. After all, the fear of the unknown, or mysteries that keep us on the edge of our seat, well that's what makes games and their deep lore so interesting in the first place, and sometimes never getting answers is so much more satisfying than having everything explained to you, as weird as that sounds. For those of you who have been watching my channel for a while now, you know that Cyberpunk 2077 is my favorite game of all time. And most of that comes down to the amazing characters and writing, fast-paced violent gameplay, and most of all, emotional moments that truly reach into your heart and soul and make you tear up or smile with joy. However, another thing about the Cyberpunk universe that makes it so interesting is all of the mysteries and unanswered questions that we still have. Things like who the strange Mr. Blue Eyes is, if Gary the Prophet was right about lizard-human-alien hybrids taking over the world, or whether or not Panam or Judy is the better waifu. But even with all these grand questions, there's one mystery in Cyberpunk that stands so far above the rest that it's not only one of the greatest mysteries in that game, but one of the best in gaming history, full stop. FF06B5. You see, shortly after the game's initial release and lambasted reception, some of the players that were enjoying the experience noticed a peculiar statue sitting in the center of Union Street in Corpo Plaza. Surrounded by a flock of monks chanting strange rituals and seemingly praying to it, the statue also sported a massive red sequence of letters and numbers, which simply read out FF:06:B5. On its own, this was for sure strange and seemed like a hint that the developers at CD Projekt Red were trying to alert us to something. But it was only after players discovered 6 other similar, smaller statues scattered all throughout the game world with the same exact code that things started to really heat up. A subreddit was made to track progress, but for a while, almost no definitive solutions were made, meaning tons and tons of theories would be hatched up daily, some more insane than others. One popular postulation was that the status code was actually the HTML hex code for the color shocking pink, which is a shade of magenta, which is why some people call this the magenta mystery as well. Others in the community assumed it might be a geomarker or waypoint of sorts beckoning players on where to go next, or maybe even a MAC address that would lead to an unknown dormant computer that held the answers to all of our questions. But none of these solutions bore any real fruit, and led to some even more crackpot theories, like a group of cryptographers that tried to break a potential cipher in the code that could potentially point to the sequence being a reference to the Polish composer Frédéric Chopin's Nocturne Op. 55 No. 1, which is what the final mission of the game's name is based on. Other insane ideas range from the sequence FF06 being a reference to Final Fantasy, to it actually being a code used by FBI agents into classified documents that were to signal first contact with alien intelligence meant to harm the government. After years and years of more research and little progress though, the only thing keeping the community going was a previous live stream from one of the developers at CD Projekt Red, Paweł Sasko, where he did confirm that the mystery was a real thing and that there was a true answer, but he couldn't spoil it. And by the way, Paweł is actually a super nice guy and extremely passionate about the game. He's commented on some of my Cyberpunk videos I made about why it was great even when everyone was saying it was bad, and I'm super glad he's playing a big part in the eventual sequel Orion we will hopefully see a couple years from now. Regardless though, a big break in the case was eventually finally made. Because you see, one of the crazier theories in the community at the time was that by converting the code's decimal values with an extra 2 zeros added at the end into a Unix timestamp, the date December 18th, 2022 must mean something important. And lo and behold, just a few days before that, on December 13th, The Witcher 3 finally got its highly anticipated next-gen update release. For most players, this meant better graphics, gameplay, and performance, but for fans of the FF06B5 mystery, things were about to get absolutely absolutely insane. Because post the update going out, some Witcher players discovered that there were actually small tidbits of new content added all over the map for players to enjoy. But by far the most bizarre of them was a destroyed bastion found in Velen, just southwest of the crossroads. Here you will find 3 small ruins, each with an out-of-place lever inside, and after pulling all 3, an earth elemental is summoned in the middle of them, which after you vanquish will spawn a portal on a hill just nearby. If you travel through the portal, you will arrive at the top of the destroyed bastion itself, which previously was inaccessible, and if you make your way downward, you find a hole in the structure which, if you jump through, throws you into an underground lair full of unkillable wraiths that chase you down hunting for blood. The only way to actually escape this nightmare is to cast an Ard spell on 2 crystals in the room, which will then light up and create a portal from which you can leave like nothing happened. But the far more interesting thing is that if you stay in the room and explore a little bit while also not getting killed, you will find this strange symbol on the back wall. If we take a closer look, we can see a triangle with a golden crest and 3 circles on each edge, seemingly of reference to the Illuminati. And this all is surrounded by the depiction of Ouroboros, a snake that devours its own tail to represent the eternal cycle of destruction and rebirth in the universe, often used to heed the coming end of the world in a specific cycle. And within each of these circles and outside the Ouroboros itself are strange, unreadable symbols in a language we don't understand. But since we're in the Witcher universe, we can assume that these are all written in what is called Elder Writing, which is a play on the real-world Glagoltic language, the oldest ever recorded Slavic alphabet in history. So if we translate these symbols using the Glagoltic reference manuals and then translate that into Latin, we are left with this sequence of letters: FF, VQ, BZ, KW, GB, FP, OVE, YAR. And what does this sequence somewhat remind us of? FF06B5. In fact, while actually trying to break this cipher proves extremely hard, under certain circumstances, the top portion will in fact translate to FF06B5, and then even reference sex robots, because why not? So it seems clear that CD Projekt Red at the time was expanding this mystery across all of their games, which only gets even stranger considering that this symbol had actually existed in The Witcher even before the update but went unnoticed. And inside that center triangle is also the color magenta, which the sequence hex color code references, as I mentioned before. So obviously the mystery was starting to heat up, but it was actually only years after this point, and very recent as of making this video, that many huge breakthroughs in the entire case have been made, due to the Cyberpunk 2077 2.0 update, including a lot more in-game references and solves for the mystery. Post this update, if you travel to the Biotechnica protein farms outside of Night City, you can find this unassuming shack. And if you go inside, in the center of the room is a laptop below an inexplicable platform with cables strewn down connecting the laptop to a large server bed behind it. Reading some of the messages on this computer, we discover some in-game conspiracy theorists that are researching the same mystery we are, and they're all emailing one man at this shack named Polybius, and they note that there have been multiple approaches that led nowhere, but that a new idea has appeared that could be promising. Making reference to a vintage game from long ago in the email chains, a discussion goes on about how the researchers at the time thought that the clue was a wall, when actually the entire time it was a door. This seems like a very obvious suggestion from CD Projekt Red that the symbol we found on that underground wall in The Witcher 3, which would actually be considered a vintage game by the year 2077, was actually a door to something greater, not just a strange cipher on a wall. And this is where things finally get absolutely unbelievable. Cyberpunk players and investigators were able to find another nearby laptop abandoned in a landfill, and inside were contents that seemed to have cipher table translations for some of the Witcher Ouroboros Illuminati wall pictures. And on top of this, inside Polybius' shack in the Biotechnica flats, there was also an arcade machine hidden in the corner, which if activated was an entirely new minigame that closely resembled Doom. When playing, you can try to get a new high score, but even more interestingly, if you check the previous players, Polybius' high score is actually FF06B5. By playing the game for hours on hours, players were then able to discover that there actually was a secret level you could access in the minigame by going through a convoluted and extensive list of steps, and after accessing this level and converting the symbols from the Witcher image, along with an entire entire host of other cryptographic and investigative steps, which I won't go into here in the interest of time, eventually it was discovered that the entire time, the Witcher symbols were actually a set of coordinates, a door peering into our final steps. If we go to the coordinates in Cyberpunk, they are in the middle of the desert with absolutely nothing of note nearby. That is, except for one out-of-place mattress sitting on the ground. Standing on the mattress without moving or touching your controller or keyboard for over 30 minutes then results in by far the most insane thing this mystery's seen yet. Suddenly, V is hit by an especially intense relic malfunction, which causes them to pass out on the mattress, after which a black screen with a figure of Ouroboros appears. Symbols and text start to reveal themselves and move across the screen in an odd motion. And then, in a flash, a white and hazy portal is opened that reveals a sequence of seemingly random numbers, and then the real horror begins. In the dead of night, in the desert with no one around you in pitch blackness, an otherworldly cube of sorts appears right in front of you, with flashing lights and a strange and ominous hum as it darts around you. The text, "No future, trust no one, and turn back," are transmitted into V's vision as you can barely move, after which the sequence ends as soon as it starts. You awake for a brief moment to find a man standing over you, after which you pass out and again awake in the middle of the desert, this time with a pile of clothes next to you, as well as a whole host of equipment and laptop, which if you read through has detailed logging of someone who was investigating you during your entire ordeal. And well, as of right now, this is where the mystery ends, with in many ways more questions than answers, but finally definitive proof that something truly unbelievable and crazy is going on here, and also a mystery that will likely now carry on into every CD Projekt Red game in the foreseeable future. Could it be related to the monks we saw around the statue from the beginning? After all, there is a quest in game where a monk randomly disappears before your very eyes, and he looks very similar to the man we woke up to standing over us. And also, how is the world of The Witcher involved? Maybe the conjunction of the spheres, the most important event in the entire Witcher universe, which saw multiple dimensions colliding into one another, could mean that the world of Cyberpunk and The Witcher have become one, which we also know from seeing references to Ciri in both games. Or could it be that Mr. Blue Eyes, the mysterious man watching us throughout the entire time we play Cyberpunk, is actually behind this larger conspiracy? To me, it seems clear that this grand mystery is only getting started, and the strange cube and otherworldly things we have seen firsthand imply that either aliens or maybe hyper-intelligent artificial intelligence behind the black wall, a protective barrier for rogue AI in the net in Cyberpunk, are behind everything. And honestly, to me, this is such an amazing mystery that is not only fun to investigate, but also ties into the lore of Cyberpunk and The Witcher perfectly as well. In multiple videos I've done on both games now, I've talked about what I think would be the perfect sequel and story setup for the next Cyberpunk game, and a lot of that comes down to potentially getting to dive into the AI and megacorporation threats firsthand. And the mystery of FF06B5 is at least implying that it will play a big role in the future. And on top of this, there are so many other clues people are finding even right now, like a lot of hidden messages in those emails for Polyhister that have Buddhist implications, once again tying back to the monks at the statue, as well as the discovery that the cube's texture in the game files is a QR code, which leads to a paragraph of text warning us to stop before it's too late, lest we uncover things that should never be known. It's the perfect example of a game mystery done right, taking place over multiple years, including secrets in multiple big budget and beloved games, and requiring real-world intervention and analysis as well. I don't know if the mystery of FF06B5 will ever truly be solved or concluded, but I do know for now it's one of the coolest gaming mysteries out there, and it surely has a bright future ahead of it. And as always, thank you guys so much for watching and supporting the channel. Making videos like this takes so many hours of work, but I really do enjoy making it for you guys, especially because it's the exact type of stuff I actually enjoy watching in my free time too. And for anyone that hasn't already, make sure to subscribe and like this video and check out some of the other content I've made. I have so many videos really similar to this I think you would enjoy if you liked this one. And if you want to support me even more, you can also check out the link to my other social medias, and if you have some extra disposable income, I do really appreciate everyone who's joined the membership program. It helps me pay for editors as well as people making thumbnails, and it'll help me make this channel even better into the future. Until next time.